I'm Zeke Allis. I'm talking about the fight to conserve our oceans. In the 8th grade, we all have these classes called modules after lunch, which are sort of like specialized classes. So our module was called Conserving Our Oceans, which was taught by Stephanie Douglas, and it was all about what the problems faced by our oceans today. We were all split into different groups. My group called itself Chemical Crisis, the fight to conserve our oceans, because we wanted to focus on mostly chemical pollution in the ocean, and we learned a lot of things. So we learned that there are 3 main kinds of chemical pollution, the first of which is persistent organic pollutants. Most of your food comes from factory farms, somewhere far away. So they're treated with dangerous pesticides. Now, it's not exactly that the pesticides are bad for your health, although there are plenty of issues there, but that the pesticides themselves, they enter the water cycle. You should all be familiar with the water cycle. It's water exchanging from liquids to solids to gas, going around the world from the ocean back into the ocean. And in that process, water will evaporate, condensate in clouds, and rain back into the ocean. But these pesticides can also enter this water cycle, where they'll also condensate in the clouds, and all those chemicals will rain into the ocean, even though it started far on land. So the second kind is oil pollution. Now, when you think of oil pollution, you mostly think of these big oil spills, because they come on the news every day. However, these oil spills only take up about 2% of all overall oil pollution. That's why it's so rare. It's put on the news every day, or when it happens. Most of it will come from operational fuel discharges, where boats will leak oil, or the opposite, urban landslides, where the cars will leak oil. Because if they put a news headline, "Car leaks oil," that happens every day, which goes to prove that so much oil pollution comes from your cars and boats leaking oil. Okay, so the third kind is toxic metals. So you have metals in all of your electronics. So those metals start out in a mine where they'll produce pollution to get those metals. But also, when the metals are smelted to form into the electronics that you have, dangerous chemicals and toxins will be released into the air, thus entering the clouds and raining back into the ocean, not unlike persistent organic pollutants that I mentioned earlier. So as you can see, there are a lot of ways that this pollution can affect the ocean, even though it starts far on land, which makes it very easy to forget about it. And it's definitely us who cause it, no matter what anybody says. And it's also you who can prevent it. So here are some ways that you can help prevent oil pollution, chemical pollution, persistent organic pollutants. So you should try riding public transportation a lot more, or walk. You live in New York. You can walk everywhere. If everybody drove their own cars, we'd produce so much air pollution and so much oil pollution that our ecosystem would just go dead. So you should probably reduce it by riding public transportation or walking. That's the best of all. Or you should try recycling your electronics, because if you don't, the electronics will be thrown away and they'll get dumped into a waste dump somewhere in the ocean, and the toxic chemicals will go into the ocean. And then the final way, you should try buying local food, because local food, you don't have to transport it such a long way. Or if you can really try, buying local organic food really helps, because local organic food or anything that isn't used with pesticides, that won't contribute to persistent organic pollutants. There are many ways that you can forget about chemical pollution in the ocean because it starts so far on land, but it is actually us who cause it, our everyday lives, and it's also us who can prevent it from happening. And it's important to maintain this. The ocean contains 72% of all life on the planet, and that's a big number. And we have to keep this ecosystem running. If any of those species, if our biggest ecosystem on the planet falls apart, the entire world will be messed up, and that affects all of us. So it's a problem that we should all be focused on, and it's a problem that we can all fix very easily. So please keep these tips in mind the next time you go out, the next time you have your electronics, the next time you buy food. And thank you for listening.